In this video, I will take you through the process I use to clean a vintage sewing machine. That means we're going to clean and polish the body as well as all of the parts that we take off of the machine. This is the way I like to do it. You may want to do it differently, and I'll talk about some of the methods. But for now, let's jump in and get started. Now, this is a cast iron body, and this is an aluminum body, but there's not anything that I'll do differently on either one just because the metals are different. So for starting in the hook area, which is an area you would want to clean, first I get all of the heavy dust and lint out. And yes, Q-tips, but you know what? You could also vacuum this out. It's really important to get where the slide plate's going to rest against and down where the hook itself is going to be spinning around. Once you get a majority of that out, the way I do it is rubbing alcohol. That's this right here, 91% isopropyl alcohol. But I've been trying something a little bit different lately, and I'm using this 99.9% that I found on Amazon. And as far as the ability to clean, I don't see a whole lot of difference. What I do notice though is if any splashes on the finish of the machine. So I am keeping alcohol off of the painted areas. I'm being very careful not to get alcohol there. If it does splash, because it is an even stronger concentration, it evaporates so fast that I'm not seeing damage on the paint. So if I get a little spatter, typically I can't even tell that it hit the machine. So that's kind of the bonus that I found. But you see, I'm just going around and I'm removing all of the varnished oil off. Now you could come at this with a Dremel if you have steady hands and you're sure you're not going to hit the finish so much. I'm not. Now, down in here where it's painted, I'm not worried about getting alcohol there. That's hidden. It's never going to show. So I don't fret about getting alcohol there. But I use the alcohol because it evaporates quickly and I don't have to worry about rust. And you can see I've got a lot of work ahead of me here. So this is typically how I clean these areas. This is just me personally. There may be other ways, and I think you just use what you're most comfortable with, but at least you have an opportunity to see how it's done. So I would just go over this area over and over until I get all of the old varnished oil off. Now, it's not going to be gleaming silver color like this one is on this cast iron one, no matter how much I clean it. Really, the only way that I could get that to look like this is if I did use the Dremel on it, and I just won't because it's so close to the paint. You want to make sure that you get down in all of the holes. Like this is where the hook, the shaft for the hook's going to go down into. I want to clean that out. Make sure it's nice and clean and smooth. And here is just a before and after of cleaning the hook and needle plate area with just cotton swabs and that rubbing alcohol that I showed you. It took this many Q-tips for both machines, so not too bad. And there's a difference between the aluminum machine and the cast iron machine. They're going to look different. Most of you are going to be doing a cast iron body if you're working on a 99, but this process would work over any vintage sewing machine. Now, I want to talk about this again, this 99.9% isopropyl alcohol. I did splash it a couple times, just a little bit on the finish of the paint while I was working in this area. It dried extremely fast and I cannot see where it was. That does not mean that I would rub this machine with it, but it didn't make the same type of mark that the 91% would usually leave behind. So I'm still testing that out, but that's what I'm finding so far. So I paid a lot of extra attention to all of my screw holes in this area, cleaning them out with alcohol, as well as these bushings that the hook assemblies are going to finally fit down into. So keep that in mind when you're cleaning yours up. Now we can focus on the nose of the machine. Okay, so several areas that we'll want to focus on in the nose. Of course, all of the holes for the needle bar and presser bar. I'm going to clean inside this hole in the counterbalance where part of my thread take-up system is going to be working for me. In the hole here. Now, something I want to point out. When you are cleaning these machines for the first time, and you're going inside these holes with a Q-tip, and I'm going to see if this one will have it for you, just to show you. Sometimes you will find little metal shavings on the Q-tips, and there's a couple on here. I don't know if they'll show up on camera. That's totally fine. It's because these holes were drilled at the factory and they weren't cleaned out really well. And so when you are cleaning in here, don't be surprised if you find those metal shavings. Just get them out, because if they get in your thread path, there's a big one on the end of this Q-tip. I don't know if you can see that. But if they get in your thread path, it's right there. It could make it harder to screw your screw back in when you're all done. So if you notice that when you're putting your machine back together, the screw doesn't want to go in very well, check that hole, clean it out again. Make sure you don't have any of those little bits of metal hanging out in there that are just messing up that threaded area for your screw. So anyway, I'm going to do this all over the inside of the nose. I'm going to clean off as much of that varnished oil as I can. Most of it's for looks. If I'm cleaning like in this area here, that's for looks. That's not going to help my machine sew better. It makes me happy to do it. You don't have to. Something else I want to show you is I'm using the rubbing alcohol. You could use sewing machine oil. I want to show you the difference in how it works. So I'm putting a little drop of oil onto this Q-tip and I'm just going to start rubbing. And look. That is why I am a big fan of the rubbing alcohol. It dries very quickly and it really takes off more of that oil faster, which that's important for me. I want to do this right, but I don't want to spend days and days and days doing it. So that's why I like it so much. You do not have to use it. You can just use sewing machine oil. That's fine. But I'm just going to go over both machines now, cleaning all the holes. This is going down inside the needle bar hole, and I'm cleaning all of that out. Once I'm satisfied, when it's clean enough for me, I can move on to another part of the machine. Just don't forget all your little screw holes. Those you want to clean. Get that stuff out and get the metal out. So now I have cleaned out inside the nose area of each of these machines, and considerably better, paying attention to all of the screw holes and just cleaning off the counterbalance, needle bar, presser bar, any screw holes that you have. I'm going to keep doing this all over these machines. But another important area to focus on is the collar here for the main shaft. You want to make sure that you pay attention to these, and I do have a little bit different way of cleaning these than I do other metal parts. I start with a little piece of green Scotch-Brite pad, and I like to go ahead and soak it in oil. Then I hold the counterbalance still inside the nose, and I grip it with that oiled pad and just twist. I'm pressing up against here too with the pad, and you can add more oil if you want. This is cleaning it, but it's also making it nice and smooth, so our hand wheel is going to slide on so much easier for us. So after I've done that for a little bit, I can come back in with a shop towel, just wipe that off. But I might do that a couple times just to polish it up. So that's what I'm going to do to this other one here as well. Okay, I was getting ready to clean this collar the same way that I cleaned this collar with the Scotch-Brite pad, and I thought, wait just a minute. I am going to show you another way that I like to do my machines, and I do a lot of them, so I do try to always find anything that will help me work just as well but faster. This is my Dremel. Not everyone's going to have this, but if you do have a rotary tool, I'll link these little Scotch-Brite pads that you can buy on Amazon. And I buy them by the bag, and there's actually several different grits in the bag. This is the highest grit. So this is another way that you could clean a part like this, and I'm going to show you how it works. So it's going to be a little loud, so I probably won't talk while I'm doing it, but I'm going to run the Dremel over this so you can see. So there you go. Nice and clean and so much faster for me. So I do opt to use tools like this because I'm doing it all the time. But if you don't have something like this and you're only working on one machine, then the other method I showed you would work just as well and would give you a result that's going to give you a wonderfully working machine, and your hand wheel's going to slide right on this collar, no problem. So I'm going to keep working on these, get them to the way I like them, and then we'll move on. And here we go, 2 hand wheel collars, nice and clean, all ready for the hand wheel to go back on. So what should we clean next? Now, on the late model, if you want to, you can access quite a bit inside the hole here for the stitch length regulator. And if you have longer Q-tips, you can probably do a little bit more. But I'll tell you what, there's not a lot that you have to clean off because these machines did not get grease up in here, just oil. So it's not going to be as grimy as it would be if there were grease up in there. So let's look at the underside. Now we definitely can do some cleaning here, but let's talk about the most important points. Where the centers are screwed in, clean out those threads for the places the centers go up here. Then if you want to go around all of these parts, especially here where the pitman arm is going to go ahead and clean all the grease and oil out of that. Then double check your holes here in the hook area and here. Anywhere where you have a hole, clean it out. The rest of this can be wiped down with a damp rag or sewing machine oil, and it will clean up very nicely for you. Don't forget to put a Q-tip down in these holes here where the oil ports are. If you have a Q-tip that fits, it doesn't hurt to get it down in there and just clean out whatever you can. There's stuff down in there. We have a nice access point here where we can reach some things, and then I always clean out this area here where the big screw for the feed regulator goes. I try to go ahead and get deep inside with a Q-tip and just clean all of that out. And it will be pretty dirty, so go over those points. One other place that's good to clean is where we screw on some of our attachments for these machines. Now, personally, this is a mascara tool, and what's nice about it is it's perfect for getting down in those threaded holes and getting the dust out. You'll always find a lot of lint packed down in these holes. And you can buy these in a pack at Walmart in the beauty section. So you don't have to buy mascara. You can just get the brushes, and you'll find that really works to clean out some of those threaded holes, especially on the bed. So I'm going to go over both of these machines, do all of the cleaning I need to do, and then we're going to talk about cleaning this exterior here, the body, and how do we deal with really grimy places like this, and how do we protect the decals while we're cleaning the machine. That's what we'll talk about next. Once you've went over all the little nooks and crannies on your machine and you're ready to actually clean and polish the body, you need to really go over it. Each machine may need to be approached differently depending on its condition. Both of these machines are not really in that great of condition. If they were, I would just be pulling out my Zymol cleaner wax and giving them a polish, but they're not. So let's look at some of the areas I'm worried about. Each of these machines have a lot of built up debris, especially around where the motor was sitting. If I tilt this, you can see how dull this is right here. And the same is true for this machine. Maybe not as bad, but still, it's rough to the touch. I can tell that there's stuff built up on this machine. We can see up around the hand wheel here, the finish is dull. Now there are a couple things that could be going on. I feel like mostly what I am seeing is actually dirt and grime that I may be able to remove. In some cases, though, it could be that the actual clear coat that was applied on this machine has worn away. And the real way to actually tell that would be to shine a black light onto the finish. And depending on how it looks, that would tell me what exactly is going on with this machine. Let me see if I can show you. Now I've tried to make it as dark as possible in here, but this is just a little black light that I get from the Featherweight shop. Whenever I shine this over the finish, if it appears cloudy, that's actually because the lacquer finish is still there. Places where it's really just black and it's not cloudy is where the finish has been lifted. Let's see if we can find any place on this machine like that. Here around these holes, do you see how right in this area, right here, do you see the black color? The finish has actually been scratched off. Also around the screw holes. Those are places where the lacquer or shellac clear coat have been removed. I'm not going to be able to fix those up, but I can still clean and polish the machine and it's going to look a lot better. It really boils down to managing your expectations. Depending on what the machine has been through, there are some things that you're not going to be able to improve that much. Repainting a machine is not always an option. Sometimes we just want to bring it back to its best possible self. And so that's what we're going to do in this video for both of these machines. So I'm going to start with the heavier grime first, because once I get ready to polish this body, I don't want to do that until all of this gunk has been removed. So let me show you a few ways to do it. If you are dealing with some of this built up grime like what we have here, one option that you might want to try first is just a little bit of sewing machine oil on a Q-tip or a cotton swab. Make sure you've rubbed a rag over this machine and removed anything that was loose before you try this. But then if you just start rubbing over these areas with sewing machine oil, you will be able to lift some of that grime away. Sometimes putting it on, letting it soak, coming back, and then trying to see how much of it you can wipe off will work. I find that this process using the sewing machine oil is helpful to some extent, and it's the least invasive way to try to polish up your machines. But for me, it's not as effective as I would like it to be. So the other thing that I recommend, this is kerosene, and I like to keep it in this little needle nose bottle because, again, I can just drop a little bit on a Q-tip and slowly go over those really grimy areas. Now this, I believe, works much faster, and to this point in time, I have never destroyed a finish by using this approach. It does take time still, but it takes less time than the sewing machine oil. So I will go around with the kerosene. Just make sure you dispose of this properly. And it will eventually loosen and lift up the grime. And I don't know if you can see it, but like right here on this decal, there's like a dark brown color. I'm going to work on this for a little bit with the kerosene, just like I've been doing, and I'm going to show you how it looks when I'm finished. Now, you want to let the kerosene evaporate. Once you've cleaned an area, what you'll notice is that a sort of white, almost powdery looking film will lay on top. That just wipes off. So I'm going to keep working on this and then I'll show you what that looks like. Now, I still have some work to do. You can see there's still a lot of dirt and grime here, but I've started to lift that dark brown color off of the decal, and the decal is still just fine. I'm even having some shiny little spots that I'm starting to be able to see. And when I shine a black light on these, the lacquer coat, the clear coat, is still intact. It is still on the machine. So I have not harmed it by doing that. It's just a time-consuming process. This has a cloudy look because that kerosene has dried. And once I get all of this lifted off, it will look much different. So I'll keep going. Okay, so I have been at it for a little while now, and yes, I did put a glove on because it's hard to keep the kerosene off your fingers, but I want to point out a couple things. The dark coloring over this decal has been lifted. And here you can see how shiny this is right here. I want to explain what I've done so far. So these are all the Q-tips I used to clean this little area to the point it is now. Because I know my cleaner wax is going to work as well to lift some of this dirt, I only need to go to a certain point to get that heavier grime off. So I felt like I was getting close, so I tested my cleaner wax out on this little corner right here, and look at how that comes out. So let's test it here now and see if we can get the same result. So Zymol cleaner wax. I know you all know I'm a huge fan of this. I'm just going to actually dip my Q-tip in the cap here, and we'll just start right here in the middle of this big grungy spot, and you can see how much it's lifting off. I like to go back and forth in 2 directions. I believe that's what it recommends on the package. I'm dipping it again and doing the same thing. And what I want to show you when this is done, this little step here, will pull that black light back up, and it's kind of hard to show in low light with a camera, but I think you'll get the idea. You will see the clear coat is still intact on the machine. I'm not lifting the clear coat off. I'm going to do one more dip. And thankfully, usually there's only a couple places on your machine where the grime is this heavy. So normally you should be able to just use the cleaner wax on the body of the machine. Some of the surfaces aren't going to take you as long as it does in these small little spots. So little shop towel, just getting some of the cleaner wax on it. We'll even get over here where I wasn't putting the cleaner wax. And I think there are 2 tricks to using this. 1, rubbing it until it starts to become just a little bit tacky and starts to dry. And 2, sometimes you have to do it more than once. Okay, so look at the difference. We are making progress. One more time. Okay, I think we are about there. And you know what? This took me a long time to find this method, and it has worked so well for me. But at the end of the day, it's really all about what your goals and your expectations are. I know you can argue that cleaning the machine this way isn't necessary to make it so. I get that, but I'm a clean freak. I can't help myself. I like seeing them restored to this extent. So, okay, I think we can take a good look, and then we'll put the black light on. Do you remember what that looked like earlier? All right. And now I'm not going to have to do that much work here or even on the top of the machine. This was just one of those really grimy areas, and look at that. And my decal is still intact, and it is back to the original color. It matches the rest of the decals here that aren't as dirty. So let me close all the blinds and turn off the lights, and we'll get that black light out and check the finish to see if it's still on the machine or if I removed it. This is as dark as I can make it in here, but let's see. Okay, do you see that? How cloudy that is? That's because the finish is still there. This little spot here is where the finish is not on the machine, and that is not from me. That was like that. We can find other places on the machine where the finish has been removed. But all of this dark, or this green almost color right here, that's the lacquer finish. All I did was clean the grime off the machine. Just looking for a place where maybe the finish, there. Here's a spot. There's no finish there. Sort of the opposite of what you would think, but that little circle is no lacquer finish. When you see this here, that is the finish. So, do you see what I'm saying, and do you see why I like to use this process? Get the lights back on. So, I chose the dirtiest spot on the machine, as well as a place where the decals were discolored because there was so much dirt over them, and you can see what the end result is. That's what I'm going to do everywhere. I am not going to make you watch me do that to both of these machines, but what I showed you is essentially what I will be doing everywhere. Let's recap. Do not put alcohol to clean these finishes. Sewing machine oil, great. That will work to an extent. Your grimier places, if you have access to kerosene and you can work it like I showed you with a Q-tip, that may really help you. And then finally, a good cleaner wax, Zymol. I can't beat it. We'll get the last of that grime off for you. Plus, it's adding a protective layer of carnauba wax, which I like. So, Now that we understand how we polish the body and take care of the finish on our machines, we can move along to cleaning the parts. I want to keep this short and simple for you. I'm only going to give you a brief explanation of how, and then you can get to it and actually do it. So let's move on to parts. Now, I know I said that we were going to start on parts, but this machine just prompted me to talk to you again for just a minute. This is an example of a finish that is fairly compromised, and it has a bit of crazing, which I don't know if that's going to show up on camera. Do you see how dull it is? And it's filled with tiny little fractures and cracks. If I put my cleaner wax on this, it's not going to make one bit of difference. Maybe on some other areas of the machine up here, if I wanted to, I could try that. But once you run into those little fine cracks, that cleaner wax is going to work up under all those little cracks and it's going to get stuck there. And try as you might, you will not be able to get it out. So sometimes you just have to accept the machine for what it is. This is going to sew beautifully. It's still a very pretty machine, but this finish, unless it were totally removed and a new finish put on, is never going to be shiny again. So in this situation, which is rare for me, but it does happen, this is what you do. A soft rag, sewing machine oil, and you're going to just buff it on. And you know what? There are some of you who are a fan of only doing this. And in this particular case, I agree with you 100%. Nothing is going to be able to repair that finish, with the exception of a French polish, but I doubt you'll ever see me do that. So all I'm going to do is just rub this machine down. I don't want it slippery, right? I want to make sure that I get the majority of that sewing machine oil off. But at the end of the day, you just have to look at it and say, hey, this is the best that I can do. So in this case, that's all I'm going to do. The layer of oil is going to give it some protection, but it's something that will have to be reapplied from time to time. And you don't want so much laying on the machine that it's getting on whatever project you're sewing. But I just think it's noteworthy pointing that out. Sometimes you can't do anything else. And just for the record, I tested out the cleaner wax right in here. You can't even see where I put it on. If you have something like that, give yourself a little grace and just accept that that's the best that you can do and be happy with it, because hopefully your ultimate goal is to be sewing with this machine. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Now we'll go clean parts. Welcome to my kitchen sink. This is where I clean all of my parts. It's the only place I have that really works for this. I use an ultrasonic cleaner and I'm going to show you how it works. I have a few parts picked out. We won't clean every part on the sewing machine. I'll give you kind of a little demo, then we'll go back to the bench and I'll show you how you could clean the parts if you didn't have this kind of setup. It's totally doable. And I'll show you other steps I take beyond just running it through a cleaner like this and drying them really well. So let's hop in and let's look at these parts here. So in my ultrasonic cleaner, I have hot water, and that's about 50% water and 50% Krug cutter. And I know you guys have heard me talk about it a lot, but it just works the best. I haven't tried anything else that works as well. Now, you may want to wear gloves when you're doing this. Now the noise that this cleaner puts off is very odd and the frequency does not mix well with the microphone, so I may have to mute out part of that. But the parts I'm going to show you are a nice dirty faceplate, dirty hook. This is the thumb screw for the feed regulator on the early model 99, and a pitman arm that we can check out. So what's key in cleaning any of your parts is that they are, first of all, not painted. No hand wheels, no belt guards, no numbered tension knobs from your tension assembly. Nothing with black paint or any kind of coloring goes in this cleaner. So I'm just going to put these all in at once. We're going to slide the faceplate, the pitman arm, hook. See, it's nice and dirty. and the thumb screw. And when I turn this on, I'll lift the camera up so you can watch what's happening inside. Okay, the machine has turned off. I ran it for 3 minutes, and I'm just going to give these a little rub down before I pull them out. And then I'm going to rinse them off in the sink. So once I've rinsed them, I dry them really, really well. Now, the Krug cutter will not remove rust unless it's just like a tiny bit of rust. It's typically not going to take it off, but it allows me to know the difference between dirt and rust. So on this faceplate, it's very different, but I do see some discoloration here. So now that I have all of the dirt off, I'll be able to take this over to the bench and see if there's anything else going on here that I can actually maybe polish off with a polisher. So this is the faceplate after. Now, I have an assortment of Q-tips sitting over here with me, and that is because I don't want to just dry this off with a towel. I actually definitely want to take a Q-tip, and I will do this multiple times just to get in all of the holes and make sure the water is out. I'll be going over these again at the bench for anything I missed. Plus, there are certain things I like to polish up that clear out the water from the holes. And because I'll be tending to these right away when I'm done this step, I am not worried about rust. So Pitman arm and our hook assembly, give it a very good rinse, and we will dry this. And a very, very big difference. The remainder of the discoloration that I can see, I don't know if you can see it, but I will actually take that off. But like here, where it's going to be spinning down in the bushing, nice and clean. And if you have smaller Q-tips, you can work into the ends. There, can you see? Big, big difference. And I still will polish it up further, but all the grease and gunk and lint, there was a lot of lint on this, is gone. One more part. I really like how this gets into the threads of a lot of these parts. And then even these little notches on the end of the thumb screw, it really just gets them nice and clean. So good and dry. After I clean all the other parts, we'll take them back to the bench, talk about 1 or 2 more ways where you could do it if you didn't have this, and polish them up. Okay, step 2 for cleaning parts. Now, a few things you'll see me grab. I will be wearing safety glasses for part of this. I'm going to be reaching for this Brillo pad I've cut up. I have various nail files, different textures. So this one's rough, and then they get a little bit smoother as I go. I'll show you how polishing some of the metal parts and screws can be done easily with these. I have sandpaper. I have a 10,000 grit, and this one is 3. I might grab these. Be using lots of Q-tips, of course. And then off to the side, I have a little bit of rubbing alcohol if I need it, a little bit of rust remover if I need it, and then my Zymol cleaner wax. So I'm not going to show you every part and how to clean it up, but enough that you get the idea of what to do yourself. So starting with this feed fork and the eccentric screw, let's get started on these. So this feed fork is from the late 99. And what I will point out is that it was rusty when I took it out of the machine. So when I ran my ultrasonic cleaner, it cleaned off a lot of the oil and stuff, but the rust was left behind. So what are the solutions for removing this? First, I can try a little bit of rust remover. And what you'll find out is that it may pull the rust up depending on how much there is, or it may do nothing at all. Also, if the rust is very heavy, it will leave the rusted area that it cleans up discolored, like a black. So here, that changed back to the original color. This was a little heavier. I'm going to have to do something else here, and I've just dipped this in the rust remover, just lightly going over it. And you can see that changed it quite a bit. So you could just do that if you wanted to. and leave it that way. I take it a little bit further. Now, I know that some of you are not going to be able to use an ultrasonic cleaner. So as I get my Dremel prepared, I'll explain to you what I like to do. When I first started working on sewing machines, I did not have an ultrasonic cleaner. And I simply just would make the solution in a larger container, and I would set the parts in, maybe a few at a time, and I would agitate the water from time to time. So the parts would go in a dish that was big enough with a solution of micrug cutter and water, and I would just lift it up and swish it, or take something and stir it. And moving that solution around worked almost as well as the ultrasonic cleaner, in my opinion. It just took a little bit longer, and I don't always have that kind of time. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use a Dremel, and it is fitted with a Scotch-Brite type pad. This is the finest grit in the kit that I have, but there are others, and I can link these down below. I get them on Amazon and I buy huge bags of them. So what I would do for the rust is one of two things. I'm going to hit it with the Dremel. Another option is rubbing it with a Scotch-Brite pad. If you don't have a Dremel, it's just abrasive enough. And you could actually, I would put a drop of oil on this as well when I do this. But if you just rub it with a Scotch-Brite pad, you can get some of that discoloration to come off. Also, you can use one of these sort of nail buffers. I like this particular one. It comes with 3 different grits, if you will. This one is the first one. I can just rub it over the screw head here. Do you see that? Let me show you something. I find these at Walmart and they're fairly inexpensive, and I like it because both sides is all one grit. I don't have to stop here because the grit changes. This is the next one in this. I'm just rubbing it over. And then if I wanted it to be shiny, which there's really no reason, the screw is hidden. Check it out. So that's all from using nail files. So if you don't have something like this, don't panic. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit all these surfaces that I want to clean up. Okay, and that is why I wear safety glasses. The little bits that come off of this, you do not want them in your eye. Sometimes I even think about getting like a shield for my face because that dust gets on your skin. You want to wash your face. You could even wear a mask if you wanted to, so you didn't have to breathe it. But there you go. It's pretty much how I want it. There's only one thing that I want to do that's left. On the end of the feed fork, this is a friction point right here because our eccentric screw is going to go in here. And I want this to be really smooth when it turns. So I'm going to polish out the inside of this. I have my Dremel with a hard felt tip. I keep my polishing compound inside this bag so when it sprays, when I hit it, it doesn't go everywhere. Just going to get a little bit of that compound. And then I'm going to polish out the inside. Then go ahead and clean out whatever is in there because there'll be little bits of polishing compound left behind. Then I just sort of inspect it, see if it's to my liking, and this is ready to be put back. Rubbing this down with oil before you put it away would not be overkill. That is the last step that I would do. Now here we have the eccentric screw, and I'm going to clean it up, yes, but what I'm really concerned about is this part right here and right here that's going to be rotating inside the machine. Okay, I want that to be smooth. So a couple different ways you could do it if you don't have a Dremel. Just lightly start with the higher grit, go around and just polish it up. And obviously I'm not doing a very good job right now. And then I would go with the second one, and then I would go with the third one. And that's going to clean it up. I'm going to go ahead and use my Dremel on this. Don't forget the end. Okay. And usually I am wearing gloves when I do this. So I'm going to go ahead and put those on. After I clean it up to the point that I would like, then I'm going to polish this even further. If you used a 2 or 3 step process like this, you probably did a good job at polishing it up. It's a little lengthy of a process, but that you can do it that way. I'm going to switch out my tip on my Dremel, and I'll use this tip. I'm going to load up my polish. And there we go. Just wipe off the extra polishing compound. I don't always like to do the screw heads just because then you have to dig the compound out of the slots on the screw. But this is nice and smooth now, ready to fit into our feed fork, and it spins so nice. There's no resistance. This is one of the steps that's going to make our machine just move quietly and smoothly. So that's what I do with those. So let's quickly talk about pivot points on the rock shafts. That's where this is going to go. I polish out inside here. I check to make sure there isn't any rust. If there were, I'm taking a very fine Q-tip, dipping it down in that hole with the rust remover on it, just to make sure that there isn't any rust before I start. So let's clean up these. So for inside this hole right here, I'm using a hard felt tip. Okay, then I'll clean that out. I want to make sure I get all of that out that was left behind. And I can use one of these fine ones if I have it, because it'll really get up in there and get anything that got smushed down inside. So that little divot that's down inside is basically a little oil reservoir. So when you oil your rock shafts, hopefully a little bit is going to go into that deeper hole, and it just keeps everything oiled and working smooth. So on these parts, again, here's a hole where an eccentric screw is going to go through. I'm going to polish out that hole anywhere where you have movement. So I'll do the other end of this rock shaft as well. Let's look at how we do these centers. If you weren't happy with how clean this came for you in the process of just, cleaning it with oil or alcohol or Krug cutter or whatever you're going to do, you can always get a wire brush. I personally like the ones that are just more like a steel color. I feel like the brass ones definitely leave a brass coloring on the parts, which just annoys me more than anything else. But we can clean these out this way. I could use a wire brush on my Dremel. I typically don't, just because I don't like wire being flung at me. You could take your sandpaper. Let me cut a little piece of this. A little bit of sandpaper. And this is the 3000, 2000 or 3000. You can just sort of twist to clean up that pivot point a little bit, and then come around with an even higher grit. This is 10. Twist, and that's better than it was, right? But with the Dremel or rotary tool, it doesn't have to be the brand Dremel. And expect to make a mess when you do this. There is just no way to avoid it. I like to hit it with this. Okay, come back with my hard felt. And there we go. And I do not have a bench polisher. Maybe one day. You guys should let me know if you ever want to see a video on my setup and the area that I work in. I'd be happy to share that with you. But this is going to go very nicely together with this. So smooth. If you could feel this right now, when this rotates together, it is just super smooth. And that's what we want. Now, you could go ahead and put the oil in these ends now, and that would sit that way until you reassemble the machine. That's kind of how I deal with these kinds of parts. Now, we have some other ones to talk about. Stop motion knob. This is off of the early model. So this can be kind of tricky to polish up. And if you have tried something that really works well that you want to share with other viewers, please leave it in the comments. People read that and they appreciate getting that information. So I'm going to try one or two things here. I'm not a fan of using these so much unless it was the highest, the smoothest one, highest grit, if you will. So let's just try that on a little section. And now this is not with any chemical or anything. It's just using the little emery board. So I can see a difference. Can you? Right here where I ran it, it made a little bit of a difference. Let's do it a little bit more. There we go. Very conservative way to kind of just address this, but you wouldn't worry about damaging the part. Another thing I've tried, I'm going to try it again. This is a white polishing compound, big old brick. It smells funny. I'm actually going to just kind of rub some onto my paper towel, and I'm going to rub it on the part. And I have found that on some of these bigger parts, this works better than a Dremel. It's a little bit more gentle. There, I think you get the idea. So big difference. Now, another reason why I would prefer to use a rag on something like this instead of the Dremel, and this would be true also with a textured plate like this. These ridges, if I use the Dremel, you saw how this polish turned black. You will get so much black in these little crevices, and it's really hard to get out once you get it on there. So for me, I'm happy with this result. It would be the same for this. I don't want to use a Dremel on this because it gets in the little textured areas, and for me, I haven't found a good way to get it out unless I wanted to maybe wet this again, which I don't want to do that. So just some tips and ideas on how to deal with that. If this were rusted, this would be a different story, but it's not, thankfully. So that's how I handle these chrome plated parts with cleaning the hook. If this needed any more attention, I would be going over it with one of my boards to shine it up, if that's all I have. And that's usually gonna knock off any extra whatever that was left behind. Just be careful around the hook point. You don't wanna stab yourself, but that's how I would deal with it. So the hand wheel and the belt guard for this machine, I did not put that in the sink, obviously. So this is going to be something that's going to get special care. This is a Q-tip with some rubbing alcohol. I'm going to go in there first a couple times at least to get loose some of the dried on gunk. I'm not going to put it on the paint no matter what I do. Clean it out like this. And you can see how much is coming off. I'm not going to do it entirely, but just enough so you get the point. Now's when I'm going to take one of my Scotch-Brite pads. I think I need to trim this one down. Depending on how big this hole is, you may have to maneuver it. And my fingers are smaller, so it's easier for me. I'm going to drop oil on this. I'm just putting pressure, and I'm putting pressure on the inside, and I'm also pressing down on this edge here where there's no paint. And there are different grits of pads, I believe, I have been told, and I think that's really cool. I only really ever need to use these green ones, and they're just easy to find. I can even find them at the grocery store when I'm getting my groceries if I need to, so that makes me happy. But I'm just going around applying pressure. The oil is a necessity when you do this part. You really do need it to help you get this old crud off, and because it's a Scotch-Brite pad, it is making the inside of the hand wheel nice and smooth. So after I do that for a little while, just clean it out, and you can see what a difference. Now, if you have a chrome edge on your hand wheel, again, these will work. If you don't have a Dremel, if you don't have anything else, they will work, and I have not found them to damage. It's just going to be a little time consuming, but you could go around and it will make a difference. Like right here, it's a little dull. I'm gonna lay this down and kind of give it a little, we'll see if we can see the difference. Yes, here's a spot I didn't do, and then coming up right here is, so it's not going to make a difference on how it works, but it might make your eyes a little happy. So, and then this I'm going to clean out with the Zymol and polish it up. So that's how you deal with stuff like that. Same with the belt guard. So here we have some parts from the needle bar and thread take-up system. I'm just seeing if my rust remover wants to deal with any of this. Again, this was here pre-parts cleaning. I did not have this rust appear after cleaning the parts. There was just a decent amount of rust on this machine. So I'm going to go over and address any of those points now. You can see down in here that little bit of orange. Ta-da! Okay, so and then I'll go over this with the Dremel. I might polish up this part of the thread take up, get that looking nice. Not going to make a difference on how it runs, but it's going to look pretty. So the needle bar though, you may want to smooth out the presser bar too. That can be done very easily with a fine grit sandpaper. Just do not rub up and down. Don't do that. Only twist it inside the sandpaper around the needle bar and presser bar. Don't ever rub up and down. And usually, unless you have something that's really heavily rusted, that's going to give you a nice shiny needle bar or presser bar. I'm going to clean out and polish out these points and this linkage here for the thread take up. I'm also going to be polishing this up that's going to be going inside this linkage. I just like how everything works when I do that. So this is the needle clamp itself, and I can come in with this number 2. Look in the nails section at Walmart and you will find these. Hopefully, I buy them all the time. So I'm just kind of going on with the number 2, and then with the number 3, it might be easier to lay it down. And they clean up pretty nice. So these are just simple ways at home, if you are not doing this all the time and you just have a machine you're cleaning up, that I think would work for you. I'm sure I left something out. There's so much that goes into this. You can see it's a lot of work. And for me, all the extra little things I do, that is totally by choice. So I'm going to get busy cleaning parts. When I'm done, I'll give you a quick shot of the machines and the parts, and then we are ready for reassembly. That's it. Everything is clean. Pat yourself on the back. We are ready to start reassembly of our machines. If you found this video because you were just looking at how to clean a vintage sewing machine, I'm really glad that you stuck this far. Leave me a comment, let me know what you thought. When we come back, for both models, we will be looking at putting the feed fork in and some of the bottom parts. Now that we have everything clean on our machines, things are going to go a lot faster, thankfully. Thank you for all of your patience. I cannot wait to see you again when we start to reassemble our Singer 99s.